We're great to have David with us as well. David, by way of introduction, just has a massive brain for statistics, and at one point oversaw all the stats coming out from the Office of National Statistics. And what he does is he's able to read between the lines on the data that we capture. So I'm sure this is going to be really informative. We've got some new stuff.
We've got some new stuff today. Thank you. We've got lots of anticipations. We actually have not previously had any research on the number of single people that there actually are in our churches. It's not data that's collected. People don't look at marital status. So one of the things we did last week, jointly funded by CVM, was run a YouGov survey of 7,212 people. We asked them if they are practicing Christians and if they go to church, how often they go to church, and of course we knew their marital status and their socio-demographic class and all of those things. So we found that 10% of people in this country say that they're practicing Christians, say that they go to church to worship, not because of weddings, funerals, or anything else, go to worship, and exactly the same just under 1 in 3 people who are single in this country as adults also go to church. So we've got the same percentage of people actually who are single going to church. 61% of those are never married, as I was until 2 years ago. And it's worth noting that the reason why lots of people are not getting married is not the emancipation of women, which is the often said cause of it. Actually, the problem is the never married men massively outnumber the never married women in this country. But 61% are never married, and the rest are split between divorced and widowed. So, why aren't they dating? Point it this way or this way? Right-hand button. Thank you for that. This just repeats the data that you heard from Annabelle, that 54% haven't been on a date for ages. And these are people actively looking for dates. So, where's the big but? And I'm going to cover 3 areas: distribution, psychology, and church culture. First, there are disproportionately number of under 25-year-olds. If you've got 10% who are church-going, you've got 14% relative to that number in society who are going to church who are under the age of 25. But then it dramatically drops down to 6% and 5% once you get beyond 25. So we actually lose single people from the church. We lose them carrying on in older life. And one of the biggest shocks I got from the data that I analysed for Jackie from Christian Connection, who's sitting straight in front of me, was that actually, even though we have an ageing church, as you go through the age groups, people feel less and less connected with the church. They feel less and less, if they are single, part of the church family, and they also say they don't think it's a place for single people to come to. Now, I find that deeply shocking because it's actually an ageing church, so you would imagine them to be much more embedded than that. So we're doing something that's not quite right. And when I say this about this data from the Christian Connection survey, I'm using a 50 times stronger statistical validity than is used in most academic papers, just to emphasize how strong these results are. These aren't me just reading the numbers. This is really strong, statistically significant stuff. So there's a real age problem. The second problem is that attendance. There's a distant difference in attendance. Men attend less frequently than women. Church services. That's been documented by Nat Sen, one of the big national surveys over the last 20 years. We found it in this survey too. Third, geography. You've got men and women in different places. We have churches that say they have no single women in them at all. Please, can we send them? They're surrounding farming communities, military academies, those sorts of places. Dorset, Harrogate, if you're interested. I can tell you where to go. So there are big changes that we discovered in that. Denomination. Massive differences in denomination. We've got this 2-to-1 figure in the Protestant churches from the Tier Fund study. If you take out the married people and make an estimate, that's about 3 single women to every single man. And we actually ran a study in July with Christian Research Limited and funded by Network Christians, and we asked church leaders and non-leaders to estimate the number of single, because we didn't have the data, single people in their congregations, and it came out to 3.1 women to 1.1 single men. So it's a problem. But when we did the survey last week, we've got equal number of practicing Christians who are men and women. So they're just not in the Protestant churches. They're elsewhere. And when we say, marry someone like you, we have to ask ourselves what that actually means. Does it mean marry somebody who likes Matt Redman songs and goes to the same church? Or does it mean somebody in your own denomination? Or does it mean somebody who's a practicing Christian who goes more regularly than once per month? These are difficult questions to actually guide people on and to understand and guide them through. But if they want to marry a Christian who's practicing and going regularly to church, well, they are there, but just not where you are often. So we need processes of getting people to meet each other. Style of church. Women are much more likely to be found in lively and family-focused churches, and men much more likely to be found in traditional churches. There's a reason for that. One of the reasons is men find it much less easy to be around places where there are lots of families and children. That could be personal because they're disappointed they don't have. It could be personal because they feel a failure that they haven't got a wife when there are lots of wives that could be available to them as Christians. It could be societal because people's response to lone men is largely to move away from them. And it doesn't help that the media perpetrates this very strongly at the moment. They choose not to go to social occasions, and so they become relatively less socialized. Men can and do, according to social psychologists, have the same number of close friends as women do. But their close friendships are based on doing and iron on iron. In most of our church services and church communities, there's not that much doing for the men. And if they start interrupting the sermons, they're usually ushered out. So they're taught to be passive and quiet, just as you're very kindly being for me. And then the women say, I want a real man. I don't want someone passive. I don't want someone quiet. Where are the real men? Well, we're teaching them not to be real men in our churches. Sorry, this is all in the survey. You can read this on singlechristtians.co.uk. There's a flyer at the back if you want it. singlechristtians.co.uk. And then women handle, as Christians, being single better than men, both in the management of their lives and in their faith. Women saying that being single has in some way strengthened their faith much more than men. Remember, these are all statistically significant differences. And we think the reason is that men tend to hold out for children and partners and actually are in a waiting game, whereas women realise that there aren't the partners in the Protestant churches, in this survey, for them, and so they get on with their lives and sort it out much more. It also makes the men who are just waiting less attractive to the women, because women like to see men who are active and have got purpose and goal in their lives. So there's a big psychological barriers of getting people together here that we need to actually find ways of addressing. And then we come to the church culture. One of the great things about our church culture is it's a church of married people. 50%, as we heard earlier, of society are married, 51%. Church has 60% people in it who are married. It's quite a big, significant difference in terms of proportions, and it makes them the dominant party in churches. Now, partly that reflects the posh, as the Carl was saying, posh end, because basically the upper class marry and the lower class marry much less. So partly it reflects that, but it partly reflects church culture in general. Now, if your dominant people are married, then that's what church leaders tend to minister to. So, what happens to single people? Well, in this slide, which is gone, this slide, the proportion drops down. This one says 25 to 55. When we actually did the analysis, statistical analysis, the really key breakpoints are 30, 45 and 60 in our churches. Something happens at those points for single people. But we got the data based on the Office for National Statistics kind of thing here. Even though those numbers drop dramatically down in that sort of 30 to 60 age range, the actual numbers of them actually exceed the younger group. Just because there are so many more people in there, the proportions are lower, the numbers are greater. So when you ask church leaders, who is single? Who are the single adults? We got some answers. The answer is they think of the young people. They don't think of this middle band, even though the actual numbers in our churches are greater. The non-leaders thought of them. The church leaders do not think of them. So in that sense, they are relatively invisible to the church leaders. And that's what they wrote in the Christian Connection survey. I feel invisible. People don't talk to me. I go there and nobody talks to me. I go there with somebody else or with a friend and suddenly people start coming up and talking to me. Now, this invisibility is really an important factor for people, because if you're invisible, you're not being acknowledged, you're not being supported, and you're not being included. And that's what they describe in 9,500 comments, if you want to read them, all of them published on that website. And if you want to look at the print copies, you'll find some tear stains from me on them, because it really is bad for some of them. Now, there's a reason why there's a problem with single people. And they actually say that married couples move away from them. If you're a single woman, it's usually the woman of a married couple who moves them away. If you're a man, it's often the man who moves them away. This isn't a singles issue, in other words. It's something fundamental in our church culture, that we trust our marriages so little that you can't have a single person near it in case something happens. There's an inappropriate attraction or something like that. So it's a much bigger issue about the nature of how we form marriage in our churches, how we create strong marriages so they can withstand single people being around them, and how married people can then mentor single people and help them through their experiences too. Being unacknowledged, they also don't get any support from talks and sermons. The number one thing that they loved about great leaders is that leaders had talks that were relevant to them as single people. That was sometimes as simple as not just using married people as examples, not just using their families in application or illustrations. So they really valued that. We got a lot of suggestions from the Christian Research limited study about what might be helpful. There is one thing, however, that most, especially in evangelical-based churches and charismatic churches, that single people do hear very clearly from the pulpit, which can be summarized in 2 sentences. Thou shalt marry, thou shalt not go anywhere near somebody of the opposite sex. Full stop. How do they do that? How do you get people to meet, to date successfully, to form great marriages, if that's the message they're hearing, which is the message that by and large they hear at the moment? So, now that sounds to me like a challenge. It's not hopeless. Many think the situation is hopeless because they don't understand it and don't know what to do. But hopelessness, as Jason was saying, is not a Christian way of being. So it's a great challenge. So it's difficult to find partners. Well, that's why we have things like Christian Connection and online dating. That's why we have local singles groups. Jackie's here. That's why we have single Christian holidays. Sue's here. You know, lots of different ways. Christian walking groups. But I think we're going to do a lot more. That's the reason why we've published singlechristians.co.uk with all the data in it, to make people really aware of the situation. We want to bring awareness and understanding, and Jackie's going to train up 6 to 10 speakers to go out and talk about these things, and I will carry on doing research because there's a lot more we need to find out about what's going on and keep perpetrating it. And so I work and live in hope here, but we need every one of you to be engaged in this to change church culture and really make this possible. Thank you.